Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, November 20th. Welcome to Viced Rye News, where we cover interesting stories that the news cycle seems to be missing out on. Joining me today, I have fellow YouTuber and snake aficionado, Nervardia. Welcome, Nervardia. Tell me a bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Meredith /Nervardia. I live in the imaginary world of Australia. Yes, we don't exist, and so my channel you'll be able to find, I'm assuming, in the description below, and yes. I do things on atheism, a little bit of science, a little bit of politics, whatever makes me what I want to put up. So I've got a fairly eclectic range of things to watch on my channel.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so starting off this evening, we're hearing about an Ebola vaccine that is providing 100% protection.
Yes, so far it's showing 100% protection, but since it's got such a small group of people, like it's a small trial, they're saying that it's probably more like it is showing 100% protection from the virus, but the study's small size actually means that its true protection rate actually might be slightly lower. They think it's probably more between 75 and 100% effective, but okay. Even still, that's better than
some flu vaccines that we have. Some of the less effective ones, yeah.
So basically, just an overview of Ebola. It's a virus that causes hemorrhagic fever. So it was first identified in 1976 during two simultaneous outbreaks in Nazara in South Sudan and Yabuku near the Ebola River in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it is quite deadly. It has between 25 and 90% of people who contract the disease actually die, and that's about an average of about 50% of people who contract the disease who do die. So it's pretty awful, and the main cause of death from this virus is usually low blood pressure, and that's due to fluid loss, and they usually die between 6 to 16 days after the symptoms first appear. So at the moment, there's an Ebola epidemic which is happening in West Africa, in Guinea, and according to the World Health Organization, an estimated 11,280 people have died as of the 30th of July. So
yes, I believe this is the second largest Ebola outbreak in history, with the largest being the one that happened just before this.
Yeah, it's not a pleasant disease by all accounts. Yeah, so it's not what you want. So the vaccine was developed by the Public Health Agency of Canada, and it was licensed to a drug companies called Newlink Genetics and Merck. So it's MERCK. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
I believe so. That's the one that the anti-vaxxers don't like. But okay. Canada, yay!
Yay! So basically, it was made by genetically engineering a vesicular stomatitis virus to produce the glycoprotein, which is unique to Ebola. So this is what's called an attenuated vaccine, which is basically what some people would call a live vaccine. So the pathogen is made less virulent, but it isn't killed per se. Yeah. So one of the most famous ones was the polio vaccine, where something like 1 in 500 people who got the attenuated polio vaccine actually developed polio, because sometimes it can revert back to the virulent form of the disease. Which was one of the things that the anti-vaxxers don't like about vaccines. For those of you who don't know what a glycoprotein is, it's a sugar or a carbohydrate which is attached to an amino acid. And an amino acid is like the building block of a protein. So what happens is the immune system recognizes a glycoprotein as being foreign and attacks it, and it also creates the memory in the immune system to recognize this particular glycoprotein, which is how acquired immunity happens. This vaccine is the first vaccine that has been proven to be effective against Ebola. So excitingly, it also may help protect people who've been already infected by Ebola, but are asymptomatic. So this is not common for vaccines, because once you usually have the virus, the vaccine is pretty much useless. We have got another vaccine that does the same thing as killing off the virus before you become symptomatic, and that's the rabies vaccine. So that's pretty cool.
That's a good one to have for that, since rabies is basically a death sentence when you get the symptoms.
Yes, it's not a good disease, that one.
So now, question with the Ebola vaccine. Have we considered just sending in Dustin Hoffman and Cuba Gooding Jr.?
I don't know about that. I think that might be a bad idea, personally, but you never know. You never know. It could be useful.
It managed to prevent the nuclear destruction of an American town that was infected with an Ebola-like virus.
Yes, that is true. That is very true.
Actually,
thankfully, I don't think that would happen nowadays.
The one good thing about Ebola is that it is so hard to spread. Like, you have to be in direct contact with the fluids of the person that has it. And then, if you are in direct contact with that, you probably know about it, so it's a good time to go out and get your vaccine. Assuming it's available. That's it's still in trials. They're looking to make it generally available, but it's a really good thing. I also want to point out this is a vaccine that we're going to need to keep producing because Ebola is transmitted to us from animals. So this isn't like polio that eventually it's going to be eradicated, because we could eradicate it in humans, and then next year there will be another outbreak because someone got scratched by the monkey in the movie or something.
Yeah. It's Ebola is unfortunately uneradicatable unless we go out and vaccinate all the other animals, which is completely impossible. So yes, unfortunately, it's going to be one of those ones we can't get rid of. Measles and polio and smallpox, because they didn't have a non-human place where it can survive, host, that's why we can remove these and eradicate these diseases.
All right. Well, speaking of vaccines, Bill Maher was interviewing Dr. Jay Gordon. So Dr. Jay Gordon is basically an anti-vax doctor. Now he doesn't refuse to vaccinate children. He's not like completely anti-vax. He tries to tell people that no, he's not anti-vax. But he advocates for a slower vaccine schedule, and while he has admitted on Twitter that vaccines probably do not cause autism, he also stated that a small percentage of children are affected when talking about autism. He didn't specifically say autism, but he said they're affected. And then he followed that up by saying you can't say that on TV. Ironically, he was on TV when he said that, and Bill Maher pointed that out as well. But they didn't really address the fact that you can't say these things that they're saying on TV on TV. Yeah. So he fully admits that they can't prove that there's a link between vaccines and autism, and they talk about it how it has been studied 1,000,000 times with no link found. But then Bill Maher just goes on and suggests that personal anecdotes of parents noticing symptoms of autism in their children right after vaccines should still concern us, even though there's zero evidence of an actual link. Now, I just wanted to go into the numbers of this a little bit, because I found there's a little infographic where they took some statistics and did a back-of-the-envelope calculation. It's actually pretty telling. So parents typically notice the symptoms of autism between the ages of 6 and 24 months. The current vaccine schedule has 2 vaccines in that time period. Now, with the 1 in 68 children developing autism every year and 80% of the parents noticing the symptoms between the 6 and 24 months, and the fact that 3.6 million children within that age range are vaccinated every year, you would expect about 150 instances of parents noticing the signs of autism on the exact day that their child was vaccinated every year, just by random chance, if there is no link with autism. And if you extend that out to a week, that's over 1,000 instances of parents noticing their kids showing symptoms of autism within a week of getting one of these vaccines. So they also talk about giving a slower vaccine schedule, but the vaccine schedule that's in use currently is not arbitrary. Doctors don't just figure out how many vaccines they can shove into a kid as soon as possible. They figure out when the immune system develops to a point where the vaccine will be the most effective, and then administer the vaccine then. The too many too soon claim has been researched, and what they found was that there was zero downside to the current vaccine schedule and no upside to a slower schedule. And there was a downside to the slower schedule, being that the children are now more susceptible to these preventable diseases for longer. And one of the diseases that's most concerning is the measles, because not only is the measles a horrible disease to begin with, but should you survive, even if you have just a mild or moderate case of the measles, it actually wipes out your immune memory. So it's
something like 75% of your immune
about
system.
That, yeah.
And it's for years later as well.
Yes, the effect is at least 5 years. And it varies between, it could be as low as 10%, but in some people it was as high as 80% of their immune system's memory was just wiped out, which means that whatever vaccines they might have gotten before they got the measles are now probably no longer effective.
Yeah. You listen to the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, don't you?
I do. We heard the same episode, didn't we?
Yes.
So now that everybody knows where I copy my homework from.
Yeah. And everyone should listen to the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. It's brilliant.
A really good podcast, yeah.
Yes.
I've been listening to it for a few years now. So Bill Maher also went on to comment that we just shouldn't give everyone the same medical treatment. We should take things like family history into account, which is an incredibly ignorant thing to say, since, I don't know if you've ever been to a hospital. Maybe it's different in the States. I don't think so, judging by how they talked about this on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. But anytime in Canada, if you go to a specialist that you've never been to before, if you go to any doctor you've never been to before, first thing they do is ask about your family history.
Yes.
They have you fill out this big, long, annoying form where I'm texting my dad. I mean, hey, have you ever had this? And of course, they take family history into account. Like that's when, like, there are kids that we know are allergic to certain ingredients in vaccines. Those kids don't get those vaccines. Yeah, that's the personalized care that he was talking about. But he's going on about how we need to take it into account. Of course we do, and they do.
In the Ebola vaccine paper, they used previous medical history as part of the reasons why they wouldn't give the vaccine to people. If they're doing that in a third world country, you think they'd be doing it in a first world country. Yes.
It's just astonishing that not only did Bill Maher, someone who has no medical training, assume that he knows better how to provide medicine than people who spend their entire lives in medical training, but then also the doctor that he's interviewing just lets that comment go as if it is some profound thing. Like he's a doctor that's been practicing for something like 30 years, and he didn't push back on the personal history thing.
Yeah, but what would the experts know?
Yeah, supposedly one of them was on a show.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, vaccines work. They are carefully monitored by several different organizations. The CDC has a committee that meets 3 times a year to discuss new evidence, efficacy, safety, adverse events, and more. In addition to that, the FDA and CDC both have active vaccine safety monitoring systems, their post-licensure rapid immunization safety monitoring system, and the vaccine safety data link, respectively. Diseases like measles and chickenpox used to be normal childhood diseases that every kid would get, but they are now entirely preventable. But the fear-mongering like this is causing them to make a comeback.
Yeah. There's something I'd also like to point out in the article that I was talking about earlier with the Ebola vaccine. There was 43 adverse effects reported, and one of which was thought to be causally related to the vaccination, and this person got a fever. So a lot of things that you will see with the anti-vaxxers, a lot of anti-vaxxers will point to adverse effects which are reported in scientific papers, and they use this as evidence to show that vaccines are dangerous. But the majority of these are not actually thought to be caused by the vaccine. Scientific papers need to be reporting on all of the adverse effects, just in case there's a slim chance that there is a causal relationship once larger studies are carried out. For example, in the trial for the Ebola vaccine, they had to report that there were a couple of road traffic accidents and also there was a cardiac arrest. They do not think that they are causally linked. However, they just needed to put that for clarity and to suggest that if people are more likely to have road traffic accidents in larger studies on this vaccine, there might be a causal relationship. But the vast majority of those are actually just statistical noise.
Well, I would think with road accidents, probably the worst that would happen there, like maybe the vaccine makes you drowsy. So get a ride to the shop.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, moving on to happy news.
Happy news.
Yeah, happy news.
Yay!
They now know more about how alcohol can cause liver disease. That's happy,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's very happy. Okay, so basically there's something called alcoholic hepatitis. So this is what is thought to be caused by excessive alcohol intake, yet for some reason not all alcoholics get alcoholic hepatitis. It is actually a fairly poorly understood disease, yet a link between high alcohol consumption and excessive loading of a microbe Enterococcus faecalis in the gut has been established. So this microbe is actually in pretty much every animal in the evolutionary tree, and usually it takes up about 0.1% of a healthy person's gut flora. But after antibiotic treatment, it becomes one of the most common types of the microbe in the gut. So Yi Duan, I hope I didn't completely destroy that person's name, who is the lead author in this paper, and their colleagues analysed human fecal samples. So it was found that E. faecalis was present in the stools of about 80% of people with alcoholic hepatitis, and about 30% of these strains had a gene that produces a toxin called cytolysin. So what cytolysin is, it basically causes cell membranes to break down. So something a bit more gruesome is basically the toxin causes the skin of the cell to rupture, which is pretty ew, really. So
if your cell can't keep the cell inside the cell, it's kind of a useless cell.
It is a reasonably useless cell. They also found people who have alcoholic hepatitis has roughly about 3,000 times more E. faecalis in their stools than healthy people. This isn't actually concrete proof that disease is caused by the bacterium, but there is a strong correlation. 89% of people who had the cytolysin producing microbes died within 180 days of the hospitalization, whereas only 3.8% of the people who had alcoholic hepatitis died, but they did not have the toxin.
So what you're saying is that after every time I do a drunken movie night with my wife for the channel, I need to the next day get my poop tested for, what was it, cytolysin?
Well, for E. faecalis. I would probably not suggest doing that because that would just be expensive and a waste of time. But if you've been on antibiotics, you might be worth getting it checked out. Or if you are starting to get alcoholic hepatitis. So hopefully that won't happen.
Maybe this is one of the reasons you shouldn't drink while you're on antibiotics.
No, you shouldn't drink actually all that much, to be honest with you. It's not the best thing for you.
Really?
No, generally not. Alcohol tends to do bad things to your body.
Oh, but the one glass of red wine a day cause antioxidants.
Yeah, but alcohol causes oxidants and oxidative stress, so yeah. The authors used mice models to find the connection between E. faecalis and the liver disease. So basically what they did is they colonized mice with the strains of the microbes that either did or did not make the cytolysin, and some were fed high alcohol diet and the other was fed a non-alcoholic diet. So only the mice on the high alcohol diet that was colonized by the cytolysin producing microbes developed the liver damage. They then repeated this experiment using germ-free mice or mice that have had no natural microorganisms, and the results were the same. Mice that had a high alcohol diet with the toxin-producing microbes sustained the liver damage. So what they did after that is they took liver cells from the healthy and unhealthy mice and exposed them to cytolysins and found that the response to the cell death was actually dose-dependent. And that was the same whether or not the mice had received a high alcohol diet or not. So this suggests that rather than alcohol causing the damage, it causes the gut to be more permeable to allow the cytolysin producing E. faecalis to reach the liver.
Okay.
So considering there's not a lot of treatment options for alcoholic hepatitis, it was suggested whether a treatment could be developed by using a virus called bacteriophages, or phages for short. So basically, phages are little viruses that only really target one particular type of cell or one particular species of microbe. So they're really, really useful because they don't kill other microbes, other beneficial microbes. They self-replicate, kind of. They replicate inside the cell of...
Those are the ones that look kind of like a little lunar lander that land on the cell and then inject their own DNA into the cell to make the cell make more copies of them? Are those?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Those are phages. Yeah. So they're highly specific to a species of microbes, so it doesn't kill other microbes, unlike antibiotics, which kill all the microbes. They replicate. They don't damage or infect other human cells or animal cells. So you can use these as like targeted for your particular disease if you have a infection of a microbe. They can also be used against antibiotic resistant strains as well, which is pretty cool. We've also been Yeah, we've also been using phages to remove other disease-causing microbes such as Salmonella and Shigella for almost 100 years, which is kind of cool.
Really?
They,
That long?
yeah, yeah. They also might be used to help balance gut flora and remove pathogenic microbes. And since there's a link with gut microbes and an unhealthy gut microbiota and mental health, this is actually fairly promising research. So that's a potential thing in regards to helping people not have excessive liver damage from alcoholic hepatitis, although it is a good idea to cut down on your alcohol consumption in general.
Yeah, last time I got drunk was at one of my drunken movie streams with my wife, and we were drinking one of the liqueurs, the sweet ones.
Oh, wow.
One of the ones that it goes down so easy. And
yeah.
I missed my patron-only hangout. That was supposed to be a lot of fun because I was drunk because I drank too much and I was passed out on the bathroom floor.
Fair enough. So if you want a scientifically based hangover, maybe not cure per se, but it alleviates the symptoms, is that alcohol stops the production of B vitamins in the body, which is kind of like a precursor to ATP, which is the cell energy. So if you are hungover, that sort of blur kind of don't have a lot of energy feeling, if you drink some vitamin B, it will actually help you feel a little bit more energetic.
So Monster Energy drink with vitamin B can actually help with a hangover.
It can, but the best way to avoid a hangover is just not to get drunk, really.
Fair enough. Also, fun fact, I know a lot of people will tell you, like, if you're out, I live in wine country, so people have all these tips for how to do wine tastings without the hangover or whatever. One of them is for every glass of wine you have a glass of water. Alcohol actually inhibits your body's ability to absorb water. So all that will make you do is pee more. It won't actually, because you know the hangover is caused partially by dehydration. So drinking water in the morning when the alcohol is mostly out of your system will help, but drinking water while you're drinking the alcohol will just make you pee a lot.
Yes, and also it helps slow down the consumption of the alcohol. So if you're drinking beer after beer after beer after beer, versus beer, water, or wine, it will help you slow down.
You want more alcohol. Officially, I do not endorse the drinking of alcohol to get intoxicated.
Neither do I.
All right. So moving on, this opinion piece in MarketWatch is suggesting a method where the U.S. could potentially slash healthcare costs by about 75%, only making 2 changes without Medicare for all.
That would be lovely.
That would be.
Obviously, I am not American, but just I come from socialized healthcare country, and it just blows my mind to think that people are becoming bankrupt because they broke their arm. It's like it just doesn't make sense.
like I know my kid will occasionally they get a fever of 104 degrees, and 104 degrees is where it starts getting really, really serious. I don't have to.
What's 104 degrees in normal temperature?
Oh God,
metric?
I'm from Canada, so we I know metric is outside temperatures, Fahrenheit is inside your body temperatures. So.
I think it's roughly about 40 degrees Celsius.
It is 40.
It is 40. Hooray! I'm slowly learning.
So
America do that.
That's kind of like the magic number where, like, before that you can continue trying with like Tylenol and whatnot to keep the fever down, but like if it hits 104, that's when it's serious, you got to go to the hospital sort of thing. So living in Canada, if my kid gets a fever, that as soon as I see 104, I don't have to worry about how much money is in my bank account. I just take him to the hospital.
Yeah. I personally would prefer to be able to know that I can go and get healthcare. Like, I had a situation where I had a bit of a scare in regards to a potential cancer. Don't worry, it came back all fine.
That's
Nothing. Good. Turned out I was fine, had the surgery and everything. It was all good.
Well, this is actually almost a year to the day when my son was hospitalized with bronchitis. So we took him to the emergency room. They quickly got him hooked up to an IV. He had an ambulance ride to a better hospital. He stayed overnight at that hospital. And all of this, I did not once did it cross my mind that, how am I going to pay for this?
Yeah.
It's all just, how do I make my son feel better?
That's the main thing. It's
Yeah.
just it's the most humanist way, in my opinion.
But in the States, there usually are several objections to socialized healthcare. I don't know why. Like, it works in every other developed country, but for some reason it can't work in the U.S. So one of the objections is that U.S. culture is such that the general population will just never agree to that amount of government intervention that they would require in order to publicly fund healthcare. So now this article that I was reading suggests that one of the ways to make it more affordable would be by modeling it after Singapore's healthcare system, which Singapore is actually... it's hard to find hard and fast numbers of exactly what health outcomes means, but they are consistently in the top, like depending on what metric you're looking at, they're consistently in the top of health outcomes in the world. They also, they don't have socialized healthcare, but it's also not the broken mess of a system that's in the US right now.
Yeah.
Now, one of the main problems in the United States, one of the things that makes healthcare there so astronomically expensive, is just the fact that there are no price tags. Like, if you're going in for a knee replacement surgery, you have no idea. Like, you have no way of finding out how much the hospital is going to be charging for that. And there are situations where two different patients will be charged different amounts for the same procedure at the same hospital. And
that
the patients
makes no sense.
It does not. And the patients have no way of figuring out that this is actually going on. But then there's also the problem of deductibles. I looked it up. The average annual deductible in the U.S. for an individual is $4,578 and $8,803 for a family. So I'm a bit confused about deductibles. So that basically means what you have to pay before you actually start getting your insurance back. So, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in Canada, dental coverage is not covered by the government.
Yeah, it's not covered in Australia either, which is ridiculous in my opinion.
Mine too. I have a health plan through my company where they'll cover 80% of the dental work, but there's a deductible of I forget what it is. It's something tiny, like $150 or something.
Yeah.
So I have to pay the first $150, and then after that, that's when they'll start covering 80%.
Okay.
But then they don't cover orthodontics, so my daughter's braces don't. Don't get covered.
Fair enough.
The expensive stuff is
of
not
course,
covered.
of course.
Yeah. So so that's basically the deductible. That's what you pay before the insurance company even thinks about getting involved.
Is that per year or per incidence?
It's
like
per year.
Okay.
And then that's on top of the premiums that for some of these insurance policies can get into the hundreds of dollars per month for individuals and over $1,000 per family. And
that's ridiculous.
That's just for the insurance if you have no expenses.
That's ridiculous.
It is. So the two changes that are being proposed by this article are to first require healthcare facilities to provide price tags for their procedures. And then the second change would be to have the health insurance policy sponsors fund an HSA, which is a health savings account, with an amount that is equal to the deductible. So like in my example, every year the company that provides this insurance plan for me will just deposit my deductible, which $150, whatever it was, into a bank account, so that the money is there for me to use towards a deductible. But that's not the insurance company losing that money, that's the sponsor of the plan. Now, the state of Indiana actually already does this for its employees. They have multiple health insurance options, but the majority of their employees choose what's called the deductible security option, where the state deposits an amount that is equal to the employee's annual deductible into an HSA for that employee. And at the end of the year, any unspent money in the HSA is the employee's to keep. So it's kind of like a little bonus if they... It helps them be more prudent with their healthcare expenses than would otherwise be the case. So it's a bit of an incentive to maybe not go through your deductible in the course of the year, because then you get a little bonus at the end of the year. When they implemented this plan, they also commissioned a study to track the results to see how effective it is. They found that the healthcare spending of their employees decreased by 35%. But they also found, now this is important because the red flag that went up immediately for me when I heard they're keeping the money at the end of the year, so it encourages them to spend less. Okay, well, does that mean I'm not going to take my wife in for her annual mammogram or like an annual checkup or go in for any other preventative medicine? But they found that all their employees were still going for these preventative checkups at the same rates as they were before the HSA funding was introduced.
Oh, wow.
And
that's excellent.
Yeah, that actually surprised me, but it's a good surprise. So they did some calculating in the article. They discovered that if you combine the HSA funding with the price tags for procedures, healthcare costs could drop by about 75%. Now, they did arrive at that number, I think, by comparing directly to Singapore, so there are probably differences in the system that they weren't able to account for. But in Singapore, they do have a similar system to what the U.S. has now, except they require price tags for their procedures, and they fund HSAs for their insurance policy holders, and the government also directly pays for healthcare for the poor. And I looked it up. About 70% of Singapore's population gets their healthcare directly from the government, so it is, but that amounts to half of their healthcare spending. So. Singapore's government healthcare spending amounts to about 2.4% of its GDP, whereas the United States is 8% of its GDP.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I'm perfectly happy with my healthcare here in Canada.
I am too with Australia.
Yeah, but a system similar to what Singapore has might help fix the completely broken healthcare system in the US without causing too much concern over the terrifying concept of socialism that government healthcare is. You know the socialism that the healthcare that's enjoyed by the majority of the rest of the developed world.
Yeah, but obviously the rest of the developed world is just, we've lost our freedoms.
But also, that's another one of the objections that I've heard sometimes, that, if you socialize it, then there's not going to be incentive for, like, the doctors lose incentive for performance or whatever if it's socialized, because then they get paid the same amount no matter what the outcome is, so they don't try as hard, sort of thing. Like, it's not necessarily a conscious decision that the doctor is being mean and putting less effort in. It's just like one of those subconscious, like, the incentive isn't quite there. So copying Singapore's system could help with that concern as well, I think, because the doctors are still, because right now it's not a free market for healthcare in the States, not by any stretch of the imagination. Just the fact that the consumer doesn't even see a price tag for any of their stuff kind of takes it out of the market altogether.
Yeah.
So hospitals can just charge these ridiculously high prices. So it seems like this system we're putting these extra regulations on will actually make it more like a free market.
Yeah, but regulation is bad, you know that.
Yeah, always. So that's it for our news items for today. Our history lesson of the day today is that on this day in 1739, the Battle of Portobello took place in Panama, which I can only assume was so that the British could seize control of the stuffed mushroom supply of the world. I refuse to learn any more about it. I refuse to learn anything else about it because I want to believe that, and if I learn any more about it, I'll probably find out that that's not the case. But
it was definitely the stuffed mushrooms.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good.
They are so
Yum.
Good. Portobello
Delicious.
mushrooms. Oh, so good. But I also want to bring it up because not only was there a battle for mushrooms in this area, but this was part of a larger war called the War of Jenkins' Ear. The War of Jenkins' Ear got its name because a British captain of a merchant ship, Robert Jenkins, lost his ear during the war. And
oh no!
Yeah, and apparently an officer suffering a minor maiming was a shocking enough event to the British aristocracy that they named the entire war after him in his honor. I mean, sure, plenty of peasant soldiers lost life and limbs, but an officer lost his ear.
No! Oh no!
And yeah,
oh my goodness!
I know, I guaranteed there were other officers that actually did die or lose limbs or whatnot, but I legit looked into this. I cannot find out why this one dude's ear was so important that he got the whole war named after it.
Well, maybe he had a particularly attractive ear.
Maybe.
Yeah. That actually kind of reminds me of a joke.
Yeah?
So, yeah. So a pirate walks into a bar. He's got one leg, one hand, and one eye. And his mate's like, "Oh, dude, what happened? How'd you lose your eye?" And the pirate goes, "Arr, it'd be battle in the high seas, and I be fighting me foe, and he cut me leg off with his sword." And his mate's like, "Oh, that's terrible, but how did you lose your eye?" "Arr, when he cut me leg off with the sword, I fell over and cut me hand off with the sword lying behind me." And his mate's like, "That's awful, but how did you lose your eye?" "Bird poo." "Bird poo? How's bird poo supposed to make you lose your eye?" "Arr, I be looking up in the sky, and a bird pooed in me eye." "Yeah, but still that should make you lose your eye, should it?" "Arr, it be a week after I got me hook."
That's good. I like that.
That's a good one.
Pirate jokes are always good.
Yes.
This reminds me very much of a joke that I will not tell the whole thing. I'll just give a summary here because this is one of those jokes that it's so bad. To tell it properly takes about 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's what this man's trying to woo a woman, and he lives in a castle, and he's up in his tower, and he goes down the staircase and across the courtyard and under the portcullis and over the drawbridge and across the grassy sward and over the bridge and across another grassy sward, then over the drawbridge, then through the portcullis and across the courtyard, then up the tower, and then that's where he talks to his girlfriend or whatever, and they go back and forth with that whole thing several times. But the punchline of the joke ends up being like he goes off to war and she says, "I'll marry you when you get back from war, but just bring me a token of your love for me." And he gets his ear cut off in the war, and then he goes back and he's like, "Oh, that'd be a perfect token of my love for her." So he goes back and opens up, he puts it in a box. She opens it up and says in a Cockney accent that I can't do better than Dick Van Dyke, "Hello, what's this ear?"
Oh, it's
and
terrible.
So it's such a terrible punchline, but you have to laugh at it because you've just spent 20 minutes listening to this stupid story.
You do realize that people are going to want you to record that and upload that.
I will have to try and get my dad to do that because I've never been able to do it justice.
Fair enough.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been fun.
Thank you for having me on. I've had lots of fun as well.
All right, don't forget to go check out Nervardia's channel, give her a subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
And don't forget, don't give yourself the raw prawn. Do 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 do